we're ready to get going here. Good morning, everyone. Oh. Good morning. Welcome. My name is Ashley Seawold. I am the chair of the Police Facilities Advisory Committee. We are thrilled to have you all here to learn a little bit more about Warrant Article 3 that will be voted on at town meeting Wednesday night. This meeting is being recorded, and here's how we'll spend our time together this morning. We've got a quick presentation that we'll run through, myself and Annie Beck. We'll run through this presentation, then we'll open it up for questions from you all. Just so that we make sure that we get everybody out in a timely manner today. We ask that folks who do have questions get up once, and we'll have about a minute and a half, 2 minutes to speak. And then just out of courtesy, if someone else has asked a question, we ask that you don't get up and ask the same question. Just to keep things moving here. Okay.
Debate is for town meeting, not today.
What?
No debate. No.
Correct. Today is not the time for debate. Today is the time to ensure that you all have the information you need to make an educated decision on Wednesday. Wednesday is the place and time to debate this topic, but not today. Okay, so to start, we want to make sure that there we go. Want to make sure that you know who is part of the committee here. So I am up here with the majority of the committee. We're missing Jeff Hollinger, who is out skiing in Colorado this weekend. But want to start from my left, your right. We have Lieutenant David Keith from the New England Police Department on the committee, Susan Warren, Annie Beck, Bruce Parsons, Phil Sherman, Jim Casey, Malika Sidmore, and we have here with us today our select board, B.B. Casey, Janet Kidder, Bill Helm, and we also have members from the town offices. We have Chief Cobb, we have Adam from Planning and Assessing, Planning and Zoning, Sam from Department of Public Works, we have Kim Hallquist, we do have Tony DeLuzio from Colliers, who was our partner for the better part of last year, and we have Lynn Lewis from the Finance Department here. Oh, and we have Bill Kidder as well. I think that's it. So without further ado, we will jump into the presentation. We do want to share with you the very short clip of the YCN interview that 3 of us did a few weeks ago. Might not be able to play it in.
At the exit presentation mode, play it external.
Do I don't know how to do that without getting it back to where we are. Exit slideshow. There we go.
So sorry.
Jeez.
God.
How rude.
Well, all right. You are here. Put this into presentation. Perfect. Okay, so what everyone wants to know is what is this going to cost us? So for the overall scope of the project, the anticipated cost is $10.4 million per the debt limit recommendation. So we do need to stay within that dollar amount. The initial $555,000 that we are asking for upfront is part of that 10.4 million. It is not on top of that 10.4 million. And then we partnered with Lynn Lewis, our finance manager, to understand what the tax burden would be. For the $955,000, the tax burden would be about $18.17 for a house or a property assessed at $500,000. For the full 10.4 million, it is, and it is in the FAQ document as well. For the $10.4 million bond, a taxpayer with a home assessed at $500,000 would pay approximately $194.17 annually for the first full year of principal and interest payments, and then it would decrease over the 30 years, with the last year being $84.55. What? I can't see it.
Yeah. What would the cost be to renovate the Bucher building? Sorry, we're getting sorry, we've got a Zoom notification. Okay, so we've heard quite a bit about this idea of, well, what would it be if we did stay in Bucher? What would it cost? And
We've heard it come up quite a bit over the past few weeks, and it's definitely a valid question. I think for a lot of us on the committee, we have gone through the process of looking at that and looking at the old studies that were done, and we've moved on, but realize that we owe it to you guys to tell you as well, make sure you're up to speed. So in 2018, a study ultimately recommended that constructing a new facility elsewhere would be the best option. However, it did outline several recommendations if we were to consider staying at the same location. So we pulled together some numbers from those studies. To do this, we would need to purchase the house next door. That house is not currently for sale. There is not a desire from the seller to sell at this moment, but the numbers are in here. So purchasing the adjacent property would be about $435,000 in change. That's what the assessed value is. And then the renovation and site expansion, what we can pull or gather from some of the data is around 15 million. The original estimate in 2018 was 8.9, but you need to add 10% for inflation for every year from that study, which brings us to about 15 million. And then there are some unknown costs that we wouldn't know until we got further down if this was a path that we were choosing to go down. And that would be, what would it cost to relocate the police force for the period in time which that construction would be happening? How much would it cost? Where are they going? We need to figure that out. We would need to look at possibly relocating the communications tower from where it currently is. And then demoing of the house and garage that are on the property next door. So, you know, obviously we don't know what those would be. And at this point, something that we had moved away from. When we look at potentially just keeping the building and only doing remodeling in the existing footprint, that would be around $5 million. But again, it doesn't meet all of the needs of the department. Then the other thing to think about is the Sally Port down below. The roof would likely need to be raised for the SUV cruisers. Sedan cruisers are being phased out, not just in New London, but in police forces across the country. They're moving away from sedans, and the current Sally Port does not really fit the sedans. They scrape the top. So we would need to raise that roof, which would likely mean that we would lose the view of the town hall from, the view of the town green from Whipple Hall. So those are the estimates on Bucher. And ultimately, I think it paints a really good picture on why we saw this data, went through the process of going through a needs assessment with LaValle, Brenzinger and Colliers, realizing that our needs really would not be met if we stayed here.
So we're going to skip ahead a little bit because a lot of the information in some of these slides you just all heard on the video. So why? We wanted to give you a little bit of background on the daily work that our hardworking officers do. New London police officers made nearly 70 arrests for crimes such as domestic violence, simple assault, driving while intoxicated, drug possession, felon in possession of a dangerous weapon, theft, trespassing, and various motor vehicle offenses. New London police officers handled an average of 15 motor vehicle accidents every month, including 2 tragic fatalities within a close time frame. Other requests for police service that New London officers handled include, but are not limited to, welfare checks, mental health issues, disorderly conduct, domestic disturbances, criminal threatening, criminal mischief, criminal trespass, directed patrols, a bomb threat, fight, burglary, harassment, missing person, theft, suspicious activity, and motor vehicle stops. So a lot does happen for our police force in our small town. In order to maintain the high level of safety in our community, we need to provide our police department with a better working environment. Attracting and retaining a quality police force should be made a priority. The Police Facilities Advisory Committee and the Select Board have and will continue to do their due diligence to ensure that this is as cost effective as possible to meet the needs of the department. To reiterate, renovating Bucher is not a viable option. It is not only cost prohibitive, but the site does not provide the adequate space or security that is necessary both inside the building and the surrounding lot. Security is not only for the officers and department staff, but for the public as well. The Board of Selectmen have been discussing and making recommendations for demolishing Bucher. The future of Bucher will be decided on by taxpayers at a future town meeting. Location. So after careful review of available sites around town, the PFAC agreed that a lot on Siemens Road that was offered for sale by the Garvey family would be the best option. The benefits are it's 0.6 of a mile from the current location. Space available to provide the necessary security while being close to Main Street. Better ingress and egress for officers, not a shared driveway with a private home. The ability to provide covered and secured parking for all police vehicles and allow for safer processing. Initial site evaluations, including preliminary wetlands delineations, have all been positive. So you can see the map here, the current location, and then 0.6 of a mile is the proposed location. For the timeline, once the warrant article is passed, the town will complete the purchase and sale agreement with the Garvey. Oh wait, actually, sorry. We updated this. Once the warrant article is passed, the town will do its due diligence to ensure the conditions of the purchase and sale can be met, and that if all is in order, we'll go to the planning board for subdivision approval and then purchase the property. Initial site work will be done in a carefully calculated step-by-step process to ensure that only the necessary funds are used based on the findings. Phase 2 will include more precise work to determine the final design that will meet all of the needs of the police department while staying in budget. A study of dispatch has been proposed to ensure that space needs will be appropriate. And you can see here the suggested timeline. Town meeting next week, and then once that is passed, we can secure the agreement for the land survey and subdivision. And then April through July, it goes through the various site work and results, and then working on the design. We encourage voters to pass warrant Article 3 so that we can provide our police force and communications department with an adequate workplace so that they can continue to ensure that New London is a safe and pleasant place to live. We just would like to keep moving forward. We've all on this committee have worked really hard this last year, and we would just like this to move forward. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Annie. Thank you, Annie. So we've got here, if you are tech savvy, there's a QR code, but otherwise there's the town website, but all meeting materials are up on the town website, not only from our project, but from prior committees as well. So all the material is there. I think it's also really important to know, like, we do really want to move this forward. If this doesn't pass, we will see you again in the near future. I think there's a lot of talk about water in this town, and that's certainly a need at best estimate. We're probably a few years out from any, vote being taken on a potential water solution. What we want to avoid is having compounded big ticket items come to you at the exact same time. But we are, again, probably a few years out from having any sort of warrant article if there would be anything for water. So now's the time. We hope that you'll join us in voting yes. Bruce,
Do you want
would
to
you
do
like to
your?
talk about site work?
Thank you, Ashley.
Yes.
A lot of discussion has gone on in the last few months. Can you hear me okay? Regarding various different things about this proposed. One that gets repeated often is the new site is stated when Colliers did their quick and best work they could, along with LaValle Grenzinger, thinking that as a placeholder, they put a $2.5 million budget on site work. That literally is just a placeholder. There is no real basis behind that. The good news is the wetlands work has already been done. We know that wetlands is not going to be an issue. That can be a very costly expense. When we purchase this land and start the process of getting in and investigating, the other big expensive item to look at is ledge. And if ledge is not found, that's another big savings. So we don't know. $2.5 million is just a placeholder. Yes, the other site on 0 Newport Road was only $1.5 million. That was done with a lot more research. A lot more energy went into being able to determine that cost. What's it gonna be on Siemens Road? Time will tell. I think my feeling is it's not gonna be that much, but we have to have the piece of land and go for it. It's important to remember that the Garvey property came to us very late in this committee's work process. Colliers and LaValle Grenzinger, architects, had time to analyze the other sites in more detail and create designs from the criteria worked out with the committee and the police department. When the Garvey property became available, this group worked quickly and in a very short period of time to modify the existing one-story design that was created for 0 Newport Road. And make it fit onto the Garvey property, which because of the slope of the land requires a 2-story building. From this shortened timeline, they created new estimates of cost. This new design was created to have the front half of the building as a single story sitting on frost walls and unexcavated ground. To do this required can you pick up the sketch?
Sure can.
2 long retaining walls. And from one end of the building to the other, there was a natural drop of 15 feet in elevation. I am a retired residential designer, for those who don't know me, so I couldn't leave well enough alone. I started playing with this concept and wondered if we could simplify this footprint. By creating a full basement under the front half of the design, the overall length of the building could be shortened by over 30 feet. And the expensive retaining walls could be removed to let the terrain drop off naturally, allowing for daylight to enter the new basement. This could allow moving a number of the pre-designed main floor functions into the new basement, including possibly the training room, the facilities, the support room, records, detective interviews, and fitness spaces. This shortened building would greatly decrease the overall footprint, which could create significant savings on site work and construction costs. Fewer trees would need to be cut, less earthwork would need to be done, and the natural terrain drop from one end of the building to the other would only be 10 feet instead of 15 feet. Again, this is just a concept that I created. The architects, along with Trude Cobb, her department, the select board, and this committee will work together to determine what is the best layout for the functions the department performs. During this next phase, there will also be a comprehensive study, as you've heard, of the current space needs list, a study into the future of dispatch, and what needs to be designed to fit the $10.4 million budget. In other good news department, I'm looking at you, Sam. Sam Clark, our public highways director, has agreed that his department will do as much of the site work as possible, again, saving the taxpayers a good amount of money. Passing Article 3 will allow this new design work to continue, and then we will know better what the real cost will be to build on this site. Thank you.
And the rendering of the building is actually at the top of the FAQ document. So if you have that in front of you, that is the initial rendering. This is not real. This is really just a placeholder of something, knowing that we were so late in the game to add the Garvey property on. Thank you. Any other comments from our committee members before we open it up for questions? Okay, I think that for questions, Chief Cobb, I was gonna say, do you mind being the microphone person? Are there any questions in the room? Mr. Baxter. And if you can just introduce yourself, Doug.
Doug Baxter, London. I wondered if actually you or someone on the committee could give us a breakdown of 955. It's my understanding the purchase price of the land itself was $3 something. Could you elaborate on what the other expenses are?
Yeah, absolutely. So the land purchase is $350,000. Annie is bringing up the initial. Obviously, the site work is in there, and then Annie's going to pull up. Unless Tony has it in the top of his head.
Bill has it.
Okay. Tony is shaking his head yes. So if we want to pass the microphone down, Tony can. Nope.
that on?
Yep,
Yes.
sure is.
Yes, so the additional funds would be used for initially limited clearing, access roads in. We would need to get in there with a small tractor style boring rig. Do the borings at the proposed corners of the building, maybe a couple others internal to looking for the ledge and the extent of ledge that Bruce described. We would be laying out paths and drilling and boring along utility routes so that we're able to then adjust the design accordingly for any water, sewer, utility lines coming into the property. Try to design those in a way that reduce any ledge impact accordingly to that. There's design money in there to foster the design and the study of and the coordination of needs and wants and all of the things that you've heard thus far this morning. So in the 900 is purchase of the land, continuation of design criteria for structural foundation, earthwork, and determination of those extents by the appropriate engineering disciplines. You have a slide of what those next steps are and bringing on those entities as part of this. And those are the funds that are covered in the 900.
Yeah.
5.
And also professional services to help us do this work.
So he wants to,
You want me to
Bill
read?
wants to give you the break.
Oh, perfect. So in front of me, I've got land purchase 350, site survey subdivision 40,000, land preparation 125,000, building design 430,000, and then contingency professional services 10,000. That gets us to 955. I think it's also important to note here that we've had some great conversations with Sam from Department of Public Works, who has been looking at the road, what a proposed road could look like, and we've started to have initial conversations on, as we get going on this project, what could Department Works actually help us with, because some of that will also shave costs down as well. And then we've also talked about engaging with the Energy Committee to see how, what recommendations they have. They've really got a pulse on a lot of what's going on in terms of efficiency, and along with our with Colliers and LaValle Bretzinger, they certainly have a pulse too, but really want to try to engage some of the community committees and groups that we have who are doing a lot of really good work in different areas, waste management, the bicycle and sidewalk committee. This is a great opportunity for us to really engage with them as well and see what their ideas are. Chief Cobb, we've got another question.
I have two short questions.
Sure.
How is the 10.4 million determined when the design hasn't been finalized?
Yeah, that's a
I think
great.
that's something that would be useful for us to hear about. And also, could you address at that time likelihood that it could go lower or higher based on your, sort of sense of it? And then the second question is, would there be water available?
Yeah, great question. So the property is on the water precinct, 100% water precinct. So there would need to be some work to connect into the water precinct. And again, this is another conversation that we were having with Sam on what work could they potentially help with in getting some of that connection done. I think there's probably a chance that they can help get us to a certain point, or that we have professional services help us get to a certain point and then they can help finish it. But yes, it is 100% within the water precinct. Then your second question was around the $10.4 figure. Bill, would you want to chat a little bit about or explain a little bit about the debt limit cap?
So.
There we go.
So 4 years ago, four former selectmen, including myself, being a former selectman at that point, I took a look at the various business policies, financial policies of the town. And one of the ones that we looked at was the question of how much debt could the town incur and still be reasonably responsive to taxpayers' needs. The state allows any municipality in New Hampshire to have debt capacity of up to 3% of its assessed valuation. Now, you know that our assessed valuation is a little bit over $2 billion. And so 3% of that is obviously a number that is out of question that we could forward. And so the four of us, working with other towns, working with the municipal research organization and other data, determined that what we could afford was was about $14 million of additional debt on top of what we currently have, because some of what we have is going to run off during this period. We allocated that, for the sake of discussion, to $10.4 million for a police facility and $3 million to renovate Bucher. As you've heard today, the selectmen are now thinking that renovating Bucher is probably not a good idea, and it should be demolished. That's not what's on the ballot now. So the $10.4 million comes from a study of 4 years ago of the debt capacity of the town, that results in a reasonable tax burden.
Thanks, Phil. So I think, yeah, go on.
I understand the way that the debt limit has been established. How does that relate to what's on the table in terms of design needs consistent with the police department?
Yeah.
Sounds a little bit like the tail wagging the dog. Forgive me, but are we backing into the police department, or is it driving budget number?
So all of that will be flushed out in phase 2, and that is what we want to do. We need to continue this process to look at the building. Right now, the initial plan that was put together for the Garvey property, if we were to pick up what we put in place for 0 Newport Road, that plot of land across from the police station, from the post office, and put it onto the Garvey land, that's about $14 million. We know we've got to do some shaving here. And again, that was a very rough estimate, but we're going to need to work into that 10.4. And that's the work that we're going to do in phase 2. And we will keep everybody abreast of how that goes. But that's literally what phase 2 will bring us, is figuring out what are those concessions and how will we get to under 10.4.
Tom DeSalle in London, just an observation. The article says $9 million or $900,000. Excuse me, and my initial impression was you're going to pay someone $1 million for a piece of land in London. Ridiculous. I think you should break out the details a little bit more in the article so people realize what that.
Thank you for that feedback. We'll chat and see if there's an opportunity at this stage to update that language. But that's good feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, David Williams. Thanks for asking the question about the actual cost and whether we're engineering this project or not, which it sounds like we are. So if you've got a $10.4 million allocation in 2020, and you've already, but it does not include any escalation or any contingencies that were applied to the renovation project, those escalations are at 10%. You gotta add another 30% to that, which puts it to about 15 million.
Can we just get clarity on that? I don't think the 10.4 was identified as the budget 5 years ago. That was identified a few months ago.
Yes. We could just have to say, all right, the design process of designing it, building it, it's going to take plus or minus 2.5%, 3%. 10% on those 3 years is another 30%. If you're at 10.4, you got to add 30% to that, which puts it at approximately 12 to $14 million.
Tony? Turning the mic on.
Difficult little buttons, sorry. Right now, there is some challenges within our global construction industry based on everything you're hearing in the news about tariffs and all the other things that are potentially affecting steel, electronics, different aspects of the construction trades. Overall, coming out of the pandemic, we're now looking at 3 to 4% annual escalation costs over the next 3 years. So I would hesitate to jump that it's going to be in the 10%. We're looking at a number of different construction methodologies, whether it's mass timber framing, large timber building framing, as a means of reducing our steel and any requirements, grant funding that you may get that would have Buy America, Build America also impacts costs. All of those kind of unique aspects of the project would be those that are investigated in this initial next phase within that $900,000.
Yes, and then Annie.
On that note, that's why we would like to pass this article so that we can secure the land and move forward with this process. The longer we wait, the longer we keep kicking this can down the road, the more expensive it is gonna be. So that's why we can't, because we can't just start the design process if we don't have the land. So that's why we're asking to pass this. Thank you.
Yeah, get the mic. So it is John Dillis. I had a couple of questions. One, you had mentioned that there's sewage backups downstairs. My understanding is that Sam's got that resolved and fixed. Is that true? Or? I'm just asking.
No.
That it was resolved so that you have facilities there that are working.
We thought we had it resolved and it's recently come back up again. We're hoping. We're hoping that we just did some additional changes and we're hoping that we'll resolve it, but you know, things change, so.
Then I had another question on the purchase price, which David just brought up. My understanding is that there's a 15-year buyback that the Garveys can purchase the land for the 350 after the improvements have been made. So we would have spent $1 million, 350 for the property, and an additional 5 plus 100,000 that they would acquire if we decided to sell it back in a 15-year period, thus not allowing us, the town who bought it, if the price of that land would have increased, and I assume it would have with all these improvements. Is that correct?
Jim, do you want to talk a little bit about the purchase and sales and the conditions?
Yes, that's correct. The Garveys are selling this property to the town because they feel that it's an important thing to do for the town, so they're not interested in having this property sold to just anybody, so they have reserved the right to repurchase it. I would suggest that if the town buys it and puts a lot of money into it, it's less likely that the town voters would then say, this is not something we want, although it is possible that it would happen. I think it would be unlikely, but again, I think it goes to show that the Garveys are selling this not to just sell it and have it developed by anybody. It's for the town and the town only. If the town decides it's not interested anymore, they would have the first right to repurchase. That means they have the first right to repurchase, whether they would or not, it's unclear, but they do want to reserve that right.
And then I think, yes, she's good.
Thank you, Charlene Baxter. It's just a technical question. In the initial presentation to the public, the location was listed as 3/10 mile, and Annie said 6/10, and I think it may be important to clarify that.
It is 6/10 of a mile. Yes, and I think wherever
John Wilson, talked about what happens if Article 3 fails. And if it does fail to pass, there is a lower cost alternative plan that could well garner stronger voter support. The select board has determined that the demolition of the Bucher building is the best way forward. The alternative plan is Harriman Option 6, done for the town by Harriman Architects, which allows for a new detached 13,000 square foot police station at the present site with 15 to 17 secure parking places and a far less adventurous access to Siemens Road than presently. The plan requires the acquisition of the adjacent property. The owner has been advised of the town's possible interest in her property and has said, and I paraphrase, that while she has no interest in selling the property, if the town feels that owning her property is needed for the police department, she'd be willing to negotiate an agreement to sell her property to the town. Some of the advantages of Harriman Option 6
are that it retains a popular location for the proposed station. All utilities are readily available, and it has a commanding position for communications. There are very few unknowns about the property. The Garvey property, however, is undeveloped and would require significant investment in site preparation and getting utilities to the site. Examples of this are an estimated $600,000 to furnish the site with water precinct water, and sewage would be an uphill climb requiring a pump station. Under option 6, a new police station could be constructed at the present site for an estimated $2.5 million to $3 million less than a similar facility at the Garvey site. Thank you.
Chief, you want to, I see Kathy's hand.
Kathy Weber. I live off of Stevens Road and go past that police station multiple times a day. And one of my concerns with Whipple Hall being adjacent is that, to me, library and Whipple Hall are the heart of our community. And there's very limited parking. And indeed, it is currently with the on-street parking on Siemens, quite dangerous if cars are parked all along in front of those buildings and a car is coming in each direction. You often have to stop and wait for one to go. What I would like to know is, from a parking perspective, I think we have a real opportunity here to make Whipple Hall also more accessible. How many approximately parking spaces would be freed up by moving the police station? And then in addition, and I know we haven't gone down this road yet, but a ballpark of how many would be freed up if we demolish Bucher? I think that could get him.
That's a great question, and it surely would open us up for quite a bit of parking for Whipple. We've had some initial conversations around with if the town were to vote to demolish Bucher, that would probably also mean the Sally Port would go as well. And we've had some initial conversations of just spitballing ideas on what that could look like.
Though we don't have any concrete plans as far as how many spaces it could allow, it would certainly allow for a different circulation pattern that potentially utilize a one-way loop around the building to access additional parking, and to hopefully not only improve the number of parking spaces, but the safety of the access Main Street and surrounding the main parking lot.
Yeah, so it's not. I think Annie has a comment as well.
So the comment about the popular location of the police station is not true by the people that actually work in that building and utilize it on a daily basis. Both, past chief and this current chief, it's not an ideal location. To have one that's close by, but yet is private, is set back, so they're not going through searching vehicles with kids steps away on the town green is a valid concern. So I just would like to say that, we need to listen to what our police chief is telling us and what our officers are telling us. And they're saying that they would rather it not be in the current location.
Since I have the microphone in my hand. I should have first thanked the committee for all the hard work you've done. Darlene has attended, I believe, just about every one of your meetings. I recognize how much work you've all done. I just had a statement more than a question. One of my serious concerns is if the article does not pass, we as a community have to somehow come together to show a vote of confidence for the men and women of this department. I think everyone in this room would agree that they do an outstanding job for our community. And I don't want them to go away disheartened if this does not pass. I think that we all have our opinions about this, but regardless of the outcome, I would like to somehow at town meeting get a showing of support for men and women of our department. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Chief is coming with the microphone. She's getting paid by the mile today.
of course, to New London. Maybe just a point of order, but we moved on beyond Bill's comment, and I would like to hear somebody address, we had a very clear statement from the committee that Bucher is not an option. He cited some things, some facts, or some information, let's call it information. And I would just like to hear somebody address some of those points that he raised in this 0.6, I guess it was, from the Harriman study.
Sure. Yeah, so for Dr. Wilson's comments, I think there are definitely some estimates that he put in there. We don't know how much it is going to cost to tie into the water precinct. I think he said 600,000. We don't have that number. That is not a number that we know. I think what the numbers that we pulled were from the Harriman study that I just went over. That $8 million, I think, was option 6, if my memory serves me correctly. But then we have to adjust for inflation for the past 7 years, and 10% for every year. So it does take it up, and then it also does not address sort of those unknown costs of moving the police station. So while his numbers might sound great, there's quite a bit that is either missing or we just don't have as fact. And that's really what we want to do in phase 2, is really get the facts.
Thank you for saying that. I just think it's important to realize we're comparing apples to oranges when we pull out.
We sure are.
Different types of numbers from different points in time. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I talked loud enough. So thank you for sharing that. I mean, I just kind of wanted to get the point out there that we're comparing apples and oranges. There are a lot of numbers that are being thrown about, and we need to really make sure we're not comparing apples and oranges. I'll leave it at that. I mean, how they say one more comment. I've done project management work when you have very specific project, very specifically defined projects and very vaguely defined projects. That never works out well when you make those comparisons.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm very just curious how many prisoners are processed on a yearly basis, and are they from other areas other than London?
That's an interesting question. I don't know, Chief or Lieutenant, you.
I can answer that question. So the figure that Annie had read earlier, that was from 2024. So we had over 70 arrests, or approximately 70 arrests for those various things. So depending on the type of offense, we might actually bring a person in physical custody back to the station. If it's a motor vehicle offense, perhaps that person might be released on a hand summons out, and we don't physically bring them back into the station. But there are other agencies that might use our station for processing. New Hampshire State Police does that quite often if they're in our area. And some of the smaller departments around us occasionally will bring people in to be processed in our area or in our station.
Hi, Garnet Williams from London. I'm sitting here. The numbers, first of all, there's a lot of unknowns. And I am aware that London, as a community, faces a lot of other challenges. And if I heard you correctly, you want to be first in the queue to get that money. But on the other side of it, you mentioned things like water. Okay, and my understanding, right or wrong, is that right now we currently can only build 2 more homes every year. And now we're going to be moving water down there, and we're going to be eating up that too, so housing is going to have to be put on hold. I'm sure not done. Okay, so we face water issues. Okay, then we have other issues that are all going to impact the bottom line. So at some point, we're going to have no borrowing power whatsoever. And if emergency comes up, we're going to be sunk. And you want to make an affordable, safe community? Well, guess what? You might have affordable housing, maybe. Okay, but then who can pay for the taxes? I totally understand the need for a new place. I just feel like all this unknown is going to create a problem. You don't know what the facility is going to look like. So therefore, how can you possibly think of how much land you need to do what you got to do? And how much that's gonna cost, everyone can guess, I could guess, okay? But the reality is we don't have true numbers. And therefore, what's gonna happen if we have a shortfall? Okay, we're gonna have a half a bill. But what happens if we spend all the money now and we discover that the site's not good? And yet we've invested so much money. Well, maybe we could change that into affordable housing area. But I don't know if that's even been thought of. But, you know, I just don't want to waste money when we don't really have a lot of money technically in the budget to deal with this. If there's too many ifs, what are we doing with the property if we leave it? We don't have those numbers yet, and we still don't have any real numbers. And those don't happen until you actually get there.
And that's what we're asking for, is to help us
You're
get
still
there.
guessing, but you still don't have everything you need. Okay, you don't even have a full design yet.
You are correct, and that's what we're asking for.
So that may cost much more money at the end of the day. And I just feel like with so much information out there about what our community needs, all of them are very valid.
They are,
I
yeah.
agree with all of them. The trouble is the bottom line. And, you know, we're gonna make our community less affordable to people. And simply just because the tax base.
Well, I certainly hope not. That's certainly not the goal of the town or
Nobody
this
has
committee.
that goal, but when you add it all together. Okay, you're working on it, everyone's working on their own thing. However, you add it up, it's a big package.
Question down there.
Yeah, if we can, yeah, if we can just take a moment to respond. I also want to be very clear about the water precinct. The water precinct does not supply water to the entire town, it supplies water to a subset of the town. It's not that they can't hook up more, it's that that space that the water precinct serves is already heavily condensed with houses. So just keep that in mind. Anybody could go and drill a well right now and have water at their house. Bruce.
One thing to remember about this article. As this article is approved, the first expenditure would be the $350,000 to own the piece of land. After that, the second expenditure would be to go in and do the initial study work to see if it's viable to go. We are not going to spend all $955,000 if phase 2 of it proves that the land is not viable. We will have spent 350 and a little bit more. We're not going to spend, it's not a one check for everything. And if I can ask you, you mentioned all the other things and you mentioned water. What are the other things that you're referring to?
A lot of affordable housing.
Why is that an expense to the town, to taxpayer?
Sewer possibly. I don't even know all of the expenses, but nothing's cheap. So my feeling is there's just a lot of eggs in this basket. And at the end of the day, how much can people afford?
Understood, and I do know that that is something that weighs on our selectmen and our town offices heavily. Yes.
I'd like to make a couple points here. I'm in favor of moving forward here in spite of all of the unknowns at this point in time. First point I'd like to make is I drive past the police station frequently now. It's probably one of the most dangerous places to drive past. I have a pickup truck. We've got mirrors on it and we've got parked. There's usually 3 cars going by there at one time. I'm amazed there's not more accidents there. It's especially problematic in the summertime when there's little kids getting picked up and dropped off. I would hate to have this discussion after a fatal accident there and say, well, we've got to do something to section. I'm not all that good with numbers, but it seems to me that if we need 14,000 square feet and it's $1,000 a foot, we need $14 million. to build the building, and we've only got borrowing capacity of $10 million here. I'm in favor of going forward, but I think in a couple of weeks, you could do a quick and dirty feasibility study on this. With estimating, cost per square foot and things like that. And that, so I'm in favor of going forward, but I would like to have those numbers hardened up before we actually pull the trigger purchasing the property. And I think that's doable. So those are my points. Yeah, I guess to sum it up, I do think there's a lot of good concern here about the costs. We need a financing plan, at least, quick and dirty one. I think that would be prudent for the committee or the town to have in hand as we make these expenditures.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Absolutely. I think one thing to note is as we move into phase two, that is literally what we have to do is we've got to look at the design, we've got to look at the inside, we've got to look at the space planning and see where we can make some concessions with the original design that was made. And that's all part of phase two to do that. Did I see? Yes, Lynn.
I'm Lynn Lewis. I'm a resident and a finance officer. I just want to address the statement that we're trying to push this through so that nobody else has any money to do anything. That is not what they're trying to do. We're trying to stagger what needs to happen in this town. In the next 10 years, you guys will retire all your debt except what we use to renovate Whipple Hall. So if we do this project now, we start retiring other debt. When the water precinct comes down the line, and I think they said 8 years is what they're looking at for the big expenditure, we will have retired a significant portion of our debt, which makes it easier when we have to add additional debt. And that's how the town works. We roll debt constantly, but I just wanted to make that a little bit
It's like
clear.
revolving credit card debt.
Right.
Yeah.
You're not trying to push it through so nobody gets any money after us.
And those existing bonds are in the FAQ with the year that they expire.
$1.75 million by the time this complete building may come online.
Oh, right.
Chepstein, so as somebody who goes to maybe the most amount of wood statements here is just not really how the water precinct is saying things will unfold. We talked about to get water, it's like 6 phases. We already paid for phase 1. This year, they're taking a detour, and that's going to be even more money. So we pay, it's, when they said 8 years, I think they said 6 to 8 years to completion. Every phase costs money. So we're not talking about delaying for years to see the cost. A lot more in just a few months. So to be pushing this at this point and saying that the cost of the wait a few years is simply not true. Yes, in this location, you can get, but it's not all that close. I thought it may be in the hundreds of feet. And I've heard the costs are like 500 or 750. I mean, I don't remember the exact amount per foot. So these things should have been worked out. And you talked about all these things now happening in the next phase that you're asking for. I could find many times in previous meetings where we were promised all these things were going to be done in this. Somehow, none of these things are happening. We're not getting the detailed plans that were promised for this project.
That's because this property came on late in the game. You've been to all of our meetings, Rich, you know that we did have those for the other 2 locations that we had Colliers and LBA put things together for. But because this property came in at the last minute and you're contracted with LBA and Colliers to only provide 2 renderings and do that work for 2 properties, you are right, we don't have this for this property because we exhausted those resources. So here we are saying we found a property. We'd like to move forward with exactly what you're saying to be able to provide you guys with that information.
Even those 2 cars at the last meeting, I asked about the properties and had to give it to Tony. And you said I should kind of discard those numbers, that even those numbers aren't.
Correct, they're placeholders.
Over $100,000 expense. should keep that in mind. So in terms of other costs, that just popped into my head. So of course, we've got the fire department that needs a significant work. We have the roof of the library. We taxpayers also will have to pay for it, an awful lot of money for the school system needs. All their roofs have to be changed. There's a lot of money coming down the pipe. And, you know, the point being made, we have to worry about those costs too.
We do, and we also need to worry about our police force and their working conditions. They deserve a professional building.
That should get accomplished and fly through any of this if we can do what the Myers report indicated and do it at the current location.
Thank you. Any other questions before we? Yes, I think.
Pat Weldon, New London. Okay, I have to say I am shocked. This department has been in that building for a century. And yes, priorities have to be done. But I think you're talking about a lot of other things. These people should be first. It should be done now. We've lived in a lot of different towns all around the country. And I am shocked. 100 years in the same building. Of course, you're not going to be able to redo it for what they deserve.
Thank you. And then, Chief, I think we've got a question up here closer, the woman behind Tina Helm.
Yes, Carol Foss, Kearsarge. I just have a question. Part of the expense of this is moving the dispatch center. And we are not alone in that dispatch center. And I would like to know what kind of responsibility the other towns have that we are providing for them in space and cost.
Yeah.
Because it's significant.
Absolutely. And I think I might hand that over to answer in terms of cost to Chief, who probably has those numbers. One thing to note is that we actually haven't mentioned here today is that the select board have indicated that their desire to do a study on dispatch, which would also hopefully align with phase 2 of this so that we'd be able to have that data and play into the space planning as well. Chief, do you want to talk a little bit
about
I think
the dispatch costs are structured?
It sounds like it, yes. Oh, sorry, I misunderstood. The share, if the cost of moving dispatch, and if we would share that cost with other towns.
Answer that one.
Possibly. I mean, I think that's a great idea that we can take away and look at in phase 2.
In terms of, I mean, they paid for us to provide the service of dispatching, but in terms of how they might contribute toward the cost to move the actual dispatch center, I think that's something that we can look at.
Yeah.
I just don't have a solid answer on that at this point.
Yeah, I think we take that and file that away as something to look at as we continue on. Okay. I don't see any, oh, Joe Cardillo.
I'll reiterate what was also said. Thank you to the committee for the work you've done. I think you faced a lot of challenges. I know right at the beginning of the process, there was a question about costs, and we were told, throw costs to the wind, just get us something. We found out late in the game, there was a debt limit, right? I think where I sit right now is I continue to hear that there are a lot of things that have come to us late in the game. And the two that I'm most concerned with is this site has come to us late in the game. And I hear you continuing to say we haven't been able to fully vet this site yet. The other thing that's come late in the game is the conversation about dispatch. We can look back over the years, and we are now serving as a dispatch center for 50%, maybe less, than of the number of towns that we used to service. Towns have gone away. And so it does beg the question with the changes in technology, where will we be with dispatch a year from now, 2 years from now? The talk about our project was, let's plan for the next 50 years. One of the important components to this project is dispatch. And I appreciate the fact that after years of requests, we're finally going to have that conversation. In my mind, we need to see those things, those couple of things play out. Fully vetting the site. I was fully in favor if we were going to sign the purchase and sales agreement that we had a significant due diligence process before we, not just passing town vote, but let us do the borings. Let us do the digging before we turn over $350,000. I heard at the last meeting, an individual on the committee said, well, we don't want to dig up their site. In development, it happens all the time. It's required to put the site back in as reasonably close condition as you can. So I think we have that ability. I just think you worked hard for a year. Late in November, you were given a new site, and we had to rush to get to a decision today. I'd be inclined to say it's probably prudent to get a little bit more information. And I am not saying let's continue to kick this can down the road. I think we need a solution for the police department. I absolutely do. I just think this has been a divisive conversation. I'm hoping however this vote turns out, that we're able to pull some groups together to say, let's find a solution. So I kind of err on the side of a little bit more information does not hurt us. Thank you.
Annie.
Joe, I appreciate you thanking us for the hard work and recognizing that, yes, we did have some stuff that came in late in the game. But we already have done wetland delineations. We've already done some initial looking at the site. And we don't have any flags at this point to show that it's not a viable option. We also have the option that if they do discover that something is really not going to work, that we can sell it back to the owner. That doesn't happen in real estate transactions very often. So we have a viable piece of property. We have a path to move forward. We're doing it in a phased stance so that we ensure that we are doing this correctly and only spending money that we need to spend. And I understand everyone's concerns about other projects, but that's why we have spent the time that we have this past year trying to present as much information as we possibly can. And I think that this is an ideal opportunity to move forward.
Yes, Chief. Oh, Cara. Yeah.
I think some people have mentioned why are we rushing forward at this point in time. I think it is important to remember we are at the point of town meeting. I could be wrong, but I think it is too late in the game at this point to split the warrant article into two separate issues again. Where it started as two, it was rolled into one. Recommendations that it would be easier to understand. I think that it's clear everybody's saying more information, but in order to get that more information, we at town meeting need to authorize more money. I would ask, I mean, I don't think I'm incorrect at this, if the article passes, it is not a mandate that the purchase go through. Is it possible that you can then, that it allows the money to be spent getting the information, renegotiate, and at least you have this time where you have the funds available to do the work that's needed and possibly renegotiate. I don't know, I'm just tossing that out there.
Yeah, Kim's and Adam might be better suited to answer that, and if the Garveys have comfort with. Okay.
Yes, Cara's correct. if the vote is passed, that doesn't mean that the select must purchase the property. There are contingencies that have to be satisfied in purchase and sale. Title investigations one, the town will investigate whether this property is going to be viable for the purposes that the selectmen, and the town have in mind. So it could be that in the beginning, once the vote is passed, that investigations are made, maybe ledge is found and it's outrageously expensive, and the selectmen say, we are not going to purchase the property because we do not think we can put a building here for a reasonable amount of money, or the money that we think. So it's true, the vote doesn't mean we must buy the property.
Thank you. Tom.
This is a question for Lieutenant Keith. The committee has reiterated multiple times at these meetings that our police force does not feel safe. Can you talk about how you feel personally, whether you feel unsafe out there? Thanks.
Sure, of course. I feel unsafe in that building. It's a big bay window that looks out onto the town green. Currently, we have the windows tinted, and there are, your standard blinds that you can get at Rockies. But from a police station point of view, a big floor-to-ceiling bay windows, anybody can throw a rock through it in the middle of the night and come through the window when the officer's out on the road and the dispatcher's up in the dispatch center and gain access to the building. There's multiple floor-to-ceiling windows around that building that honestly people can kick in. So just in general, the windows of the building make it feel unsafe. Walking out to personal vehicles, walking out to cruisers, yes, there's lighting, but there's no perimeter fence. There's no barrier to keep the public bad actors out of it. Yeah, we have security cameras. They are in terrible condition. They need to be updated, but it's gonna cost a lot of money to do that, and we can't run any wires. So that's, in a nutshell, how I would feel unsafe in that. Does that answer your question?
It just begs the question, why don't we put bulletproof windows in there?
Windows cost a lot of money, and we're just.
If it's an issue, let's make it go away.
Right, but we're just patching the building more together.
I would echo Lieutenant Keith's statements that it does feel very unsafe in that building. We feel like we're in a fishbowl right in the middle of everything. There's no security, there's no fencing, we feel like we're in a fishbowl and we're on display all the time. So it does feel unsafe in the building. There's a hand here.
Yes.
I get that.
You've had past incidents when people came, and injured people?
I can say I've worked for the town for 12 to 13 years, and I've never had a brick come through the window, which is great. But to have
I do believe though that you have knocking on the windows.
Yes, we have had people knock on the windows looking how to get to dispatch. Having people walking down driveways, when the police car is running, yeah, it causes a concern. It's the police cars.
It's.
No.
Is that what it's gonna take? Is that what it's gonna take?
We also, it's not just for our security, the people that walk up and down the shared driveway with our next door neighbor's house, it's a concern. If we go all pouring out of the building to go to a hot call and to go to an emergency, and we have people using our driveway as a sidewalk, or children playing around our tower, which we have had in the past, that is a concern. So it's not just our security that we are concerned about, it's the people that circulate around our building we are also concerned about.
Okay, I think we'll take one more question and then get everybody out on their Saturday.
My question is, if in fact this doesn't pass, which by the way, I'm all in favor of it because of how you've explained the limited amount of money that might be spent, if it does not pass at town meeting on Wednesday,
how long would it take before that your committee would would it be a special town meeting? Wait a year? How long might it be?
Yeah, I think that we'd probably have to go back to ground zero and figure out what would be on the next, on the warrant, what warrant article will be on the next town meeting, the following year.
Well, I think it's a no-brainer that the fact that you don't have to buy the land, if you find it's not accessible, not good, it just seems like we have to move forward. And I can tell that the committee is very concerned about money. And I thank you for all of your hard work.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, well, we hope to see everyone at town meeting Wednesday night, and then voting for elected officials. The school board is on Tuesday at Whipple Hall, so voting all day Tuesday. That is not the warrant articles. Warrant articles are at town meeting. Thanks everyone for coming.